is the 11 Dubcast. I'm Johnny. He's George, and we're right. We're always right.
We know ball.
if
The
you
Dubcast knows ball.
That's right. If you thought that we don't know ball, you are incorrect. We are correct, and I think we will continue to be correct.
We are students of history, scholars of the past, and this is why we can see and tell the future.
That's
and
right.
If you are part of our wonderful listening audience, you are along for the ride and able to enjoy
Dubstradamus.
You're able to just see everything before it happens, while the masses and the casuals and the haters,
peons,
the haters and losers, of which there are many, are saying that Ohio State has an 85% chance to make the NCAA tournament before they play Michigan. We're over here on the Dubcast giving you your medicine, the raw truth that this team is not going to dance, even if we want to see them do it.
Yeah,
and lo and behold, look where we are.
I take no pleasure in announcing the fact that Ohio State has lost 3 in a row,
of course
and they're almost, a lock to not make the tournament now.
No, we just take pleasure in telling people that say we don't know what we're talking about that actually you don't know what you're talking about.
Right. It has nothing to do with me being happy about Ohio State being bad. It has everything to do with me being happy that everyone else was wrong and we were right. So I just want to start. We'll start with that by alienating the audience. Let's do that. Let's start our podcast making everybody upset, and then we'll expect them to sit around for another 45 minutes. So no, I mean, I get it. You want to be optimistic about the team. They do have some really solid components, and you want Diebler to succeed because he's a great guy. All this stuff, I understand it. All of this tongue-in-cheek stuff aside.
And they also have some really solid congestion in their sinuses because everybody is very sick right now.
Everybody's sick.
It's
they
take the recent results with a grain of salt.
Right. And so they had to go on a West Coast trip, which, I mean, they're playing USC next. If you watch the UCLA game, first of all, Mick Cronin, his squad in general has been so up and down, and it feels like they're just, at this point, it's one of those things where they're just playing for their, to not get yelled at. Like that's literally like that's his coaching style. It's like, we got to win this game just so we don't have to listen to this douchebag, sound off on us.
That's
to
a
the
great
media.
Motivator,
I guess. I mean, he's a Cincinnati man through and through. I think Mick Cronin is hilarious, but also, like a dick. So I was a little sad that Ohio State couldn't pull off the victory against UCLA. But they were sick. I mean, that's a real thing. It's not an excuse. It's something where the team is dealing with. They're on this West Coast trip where they have to fly all the way out to LA. And now they're staring, like I said, a 3-loss kind of stretch here in the face. And the problem is that you only got 3 more games left. And even if you win all of those, you get to 18 wins. So as we kind of started with this, their chances of getting to March Madness are, in my opinion, basically nil at this point. Even if they go on a 3-game tear, and even if they win a bunch in the tournament, which I do not see happening, they're in dire straits at this point. So it sucks. And,
I guess Aaron Bradshaw is going to get healthy, and he's gonna
right.
play he's going to play as many minutes as Bruce Thornton, and he's not going to get in foul trouble, and it's all going to turn around here in the last week into the Big Ten tournament.
Well, I mean, the thing is, though, if you take care of business against Nebraska, if you pull it out against Michigan,
take care of business against Northwestern,
right? Like, seriously, if you win 2 of those 3 games, you're probably okay. But at this point, they've kind of shot that into the sun, and so I hope that they're able to pull this off. But honestly, watching that game was really depressing today. You only had 2 guys in double digits. Thornton did his business, right, which is great, but everybody else just seemed completely out of it. And that's why, when they say like there's flu going around and the team's sick, I absolutely believe it, because that didn't seem like a performance from a team that didn't care. That seemed like a performance from a team that could not actually play a full game of basketball. And that's a problem. So hopefully they feel better in the next few days. But that's going to be tough.
I had been kind of halfway. I mean, I watched the first half and then I couldn't watch the second half because I had to go to dinner. So, I mean, they were, they didn't get run out of the building or
No,
anything
no,
the
no.
way they did in the previous game, which is really, I think, what should be more focused on than what happened today, because they could have beaten Northwestern and they were still probably going to lose this game just because it was a West Coast road trip to a team that is going to be in the tournament that had better momentum
Mm-hmm.
than Ohio State. Even coming off, even if Ohio State had beaten Northwestern and UCLA, the loss that they had to Minnesota in their previous game, in which they blew a 17-point lead, which precipitated the yelling of Mick Cronin, the wrath
Right.
of Cronin, if you will. You would still have a hard time telling me that UCLA doesn't have better momentum going into the home stretch
Yeah.
than what Ohio State had. But that Northwestern win was like uniquely terrible. Like it was.
I would say, I mean, we've said this a lot. There's been a lot of like worst losses in recent history for Ohio State men's basketball. I feel like that's one of the top three in the
They
past
were down
5 years
like
or so.
26 points at one point to a three-legged Wildcat team.
Yeah.
Like that team was injured, missing like two of its three best players, arguably, and because they just had more skilled guys over the height of 6'9", they were able to find their best player didn't even have a great game, who's leading the conference in scoring this year.
Mm-hmm.
And they still found a way to run Ohio State out of their own gym. That was the third time in the last 7 meetings in Columbus that Ohio State has lost to Northwestern after they previously didn't lose at home to Northwestern from the span of like 1975 to 2017.
Yeah.
Like it was horrible. Adam Jardy tweeted out after the game, it was the first time that Northwestern has won 3 straight against Ohio State since 1966 to 1967. It was the first time that they've won back-to-back road games in Columbus since 1932 and 1934. We're talking about almost 100 years of results here. And then to top it all off, courtesy of the BTN stats guys, that was just Northwestern's 5th Big Ten road win by 20 or more points in the last 75 years.
Nice.
And it came without 2 of their top 3 scorers.
Right.
And their top scorer having a bad game by his own standards he set this season.
Yeah, Ohio State,
you can't blow a game like that if you want to be a tournament team.
Yeah, they didn't score, I think, for the last minute of the first half, and then they didn't score until the 6th minute of the second half. So they went basically like 7 minutes of game time without scoring any points at all. And Northwestern went from like a coin flip as a winner, in terms of game probability, to like a 99.9% chance of them winning in that 7-minute stretch where Ohio State literally did nothing. And then Northwestern, I mean, they didn't, necessarily just like shoot the lights out. It's just that they scored and Ohio State didn't. So that was bad.
And the crazy thing is, while we're saying that this team probably shouldn't be a bubble team while everybody else is anointing them as such, I'm still writing off that Northwestern game as a win for Ohio State. Yeah. I'm more preoccupied with the back-to-back games in Los Angeles against UCLA and USC coming up, and then games against Nebraska and Indiana, 2 teams that are desperate to try to get some late wins to vault themselves into tournament contention. And they've still got 3 of those games left at this point. But I'd been willing to write off that, okay, they're probably going to lose to UCLA, but USC's winnable game. Nebraska revenge is certainly winnable. And then Indiana's a critical game. But that you pair 3 of those wins with a win over Northwestern here down the stretch, you can go 6-2 again with 1 loss to Michigan and then 1 other loss in that stretch, and you're still probably going to be good. But they found a way to screw it up even before that. Right. It was truly miraculously bad.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just the fact that they lost in spectacular fact. I mean, I agree with you. I think the biggest problem is that now they're dealing with a 3-game stretch of teams that are trying to play into the tournament. Nebraska is ahead of them in the standings. Indiana is ahead of them in the standings. It'd be really hilarious that Indiana would get into the NCAA tournament at this point, but they have a better shot than Ohio State does. and they'll be playing, like, again, it's the last game of the season, right? Like, it's not a situation where Ohio State kind of can catch them napping or something like that. You've got to go on the road to Bloomington in a game that might be a play-in game for them for the NCAA tournament, to send their coach out on a high note. So that's going to be really,
they're
really
rallying
tough.
around Mike Woodson.
They are,
for whatever reason.
They just took out Purdue today. They just took out Purdue,
and they were mobbing him in the post game interview afterwards. They like that guy, even though he's already communicated he's on his way out. So
yeah, exactly.
The rumors of the demise of the pedigree of the Indiana job have been greatly exaggerated.
Yeah.
Even as Dusty May extends himself in Michigan.
Well, and that's the other thing. And I did want to talk about that because in the meantime, Michigan, they are now a half game behind Michigan State in the Big Ten standings, but still, they're essentially tied for first. And Dusty May just got himself a big old contract extension. It does not appear that he's going to Indiana anytime soon. And he's got that team looking pretty dangerous. And here's the other thing. They're going to be pretty good, I think, in the NCAA tournament. They've got a really difficult team to plan against and to play against just because of those 7-footers. And that's going to be really sour grapes watching this thing, watching March Madness, while, especially if Michigan ends up making to like the Sweet 16 or something like that. Again, I want Diebler. I want Jake Diebler to succeed. I, again, think he's a great guy. But this is like a long rebuild, and it feels like it never had to be that. You could have made the hire of Dusty May. It could have gotten done a lot much more quickly than it appears like it's going to take. Even if Diebler improves from year to year, this is like a 2 or 3 year process now at this point. They're not going to vault all of a sudden to being a top 10 team next season. It's just not going to happen. Michigan might. And that's, I think, the concern that a lot of people had when Dusty May was kind of passed over for Diebler, because it is going to take a much longer period of time, and you don't even know if it's going to work out. And with Dusty May, dividends, it has immediately paid dividends in Ann Arbor. And that kind of sucks to watch, frankly.
Yeah. So it was the biggest problem with letting a candidate like that go to begin with that we talked about, is that, okay, you can, if you don't hire Diebler, Michigan's not going to hire Diebler. Diebler's right. going to go. Diebler will go be the head coach at Finley or something. He's going to have to go cut his teeth somewhere else. But this guy who was in the tournament 2 years in a row and is one of the hottest head coaching candidates in the country, you let this guy go, he's probably going to go to the other job right down the street that is, was very clearly going to open up, and they were clearly trying to get somebody in there that was going to be able to reposition them relative to the Boeheim era, or at least the early stages of the Juwan Howard era before things went off the rails.
Sure.
They were not comfortable. They wanted to get back to relevancy from the bottom of the conference, and they did that, and they've got their guy. And it's really frustrating how obvious it was to
right.
people that saw it a year ago.
Yeah.
And they still opted to go with what was, I guess, the cheaper option. And you can, it's easier to forgive just for the sheer sake of, people were saying, the boosters probably want to go all in on football. Well, it ended up working out pretty well, I think. I don't
think anybody would complain about that.
Championship. And I think, and that brings up another interesting thing. Would you, people talk about a year ago, if I had told you that Ohio State, if I posed to you this hypothetical when we were dealing with whether or not they were going to hire Dusty May or Jake Diebler, I said, Ohio State is going to hire the worst candidate between those two, and the other guy's going to go to Michigan and reinvigorate that program. But Ohio State is also going to win the national championship in football next season.
Okay.
Would you have taken that?
Oh, yeah, 100 times out of 100.
It's exactly my point. Because that's literally the reality that we're in right now.
Yeah, no.
So
if that was the decision, though, I mean, and that's the thing, though. Like, why do you have to choose?
It's the only logical explanation for why the decision was made to take Diebler over.
I guess.
Frankly,
I mean, it's not the same pool of money, though. The NIL stuff is not coming out of the same pocket that the money for coaches is. You know what I mean? Like, I understand that boosters have a finite amount of money, and they're not going to just like spread it around equally or whatever. But like, I feel like they could have done both. And I honestly think that
I agree with you.
Yeah, and I think the choice of Diebler was not a financial decision where they're like, oh, we got to save some bucks here. It was an emotional decision, based on how the team reacted after they fired Holtman.
Prisoners of the moment.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what happened there, where it was like, we're going to keep this thing rolling, and, this is going to either end up being a great decision on our part, or we'll go ahead and take the couple year setback. The problem is that you had like you just said, you had an obvious solution staring you in the face. If Dusty May wasn't there, let me put it this way. If Dusty May wasn't there and they didn't have a good option besides Diebler, right? And they would have had to reach for some guys. I'd be like, sure, hell yeah, go get Diebler. That's fine. But you had a dude who was the obvious solution to your problem. Yeah. And that's the issue that I think a lot of people have at this point. It's not that Diebler was a bad choice, under any circumstance. It was just that in that particular circumstance, he wasn't the right choice. And we're kind of seeing that play out a little bit. Now, do I think he's going to tank the program or anything like? No, I don't think that. I think you've had some personnel issues that they need to work around and figure out. And that's something that's impacted Ohio State men's basketball for years.
And not
now.
only that, I mean, I think he's an objectively good coach.
I do too.
I don't think he's a bad coach. I think the fact that Ohio State was in the position that they were 2 weeks ago when people were writing them off as a tournament team is because they said it on the broadcast today. Of all the remaining bubble teams, they had more losses than any of the other candidates. Yeah. The only way that you're able to be in that sort of competition with that many losses is if the quality of your wins is exceptional. Right. And they have several brilliant wins this year that are a direct product of the great coaching that Diebler did.
And I would also say
that this team is incredibly inconsistent.
Right.
Which is what we said 2 weeks ago. The most consistent thing about their identity is their inconsistency. Yeah. And it was reflected in how they were a game-tying shot away from going to overtime with Michigan, who you just said is going to be one of the toughest outs in the tournament given the matchups, which is totally true. And they're a matchup nightmare for Ohio State even. And then in the very next game after that, they have their worst loss of the season.
Right.
They're a total roller coaster.
Right. Which is why it was so crazy to me and to you when we talked about this, that they were like, 80% chance to make the tournament ball. It was like, who have you been watching all season? This is a team that will do exactly what we saw against Michigan and Northwestern. And it's not a surprise that that's happened. Now,
no, this is our first time talking hoops. We have no idea what we're talking about.
Well, I don't, but
we're just
I don't
some jamokes.
Yeah. Well,
we are student. This is an important point.
Yeah.
You and I are both students of history.
Sure.
What we lack in terms of maybe D1 collegiate athletic experience that you might be getting from some other shows. You and I are both very studied in, we respect history both in sports and beyond sports. And when you're able to recognize, what makes teams successful and what leads to the downfall of other teams, regardless of whether it's football or basketball or just athletics generally, just team dynamics, you're able to understand when things are going right and when things are going off the rails.
Sure, yeah.
And we don't get it right 100% of the time, but I think that part of the reason that we have the good dynamic that we do, Johnny, is that we both respect history in a way that when things are going right, we can see how in previous installments of the sports, it's going to work out the way that it ends up working out. And when something's fishy, we're both willing to call it out for what it is.
Yeah. And I think sometimes you kind of have to trust your gut on certain things. You know what I mean? Like look at
Absolutely.
look at how a team has performed and go, what does that tell me? Instead of trying to project future success or failure based on, I don't know, vibes or whatever you think, like just see what you see. Like look at what you see and then make the call, based on that. That's why I said that I thought Tennessee was going to beat Ohio State in the first round of the playoff, right? It would have been very easy to be like,
we
Ohio
both
State.
picked Oregon to beat them, did we
Yeah,
not?
hell, and that's fine. But we also, I think, were smart enough and had the temerity to go, oh, okay, now we have some precedent here against Tennessee, against Oregon. Now they're going to beat Texas. Now they're going to beat Notre Dame. And that's kind of how I think we both function, is like, what are we seeing? What are we actually seeing from these teams that we're talking about? And with Ohio State men's basketball, I think it's pretty obvious what we've been seeing. This is an incredibly up and down team.
You wanted to pick Michigan to beat them so bad. You were very conflicted about it. I thought they were gonna. We all thought they were gonna kill him, but you were the one guy that was like, I want to do it. I can't pull the trigger on it. But you knew in your gut, you could feel it. You knew what was happening.
Well, and then I went ahead and made 2 stupid calls in the playoffs, but it's fine.
You can't be right 100% of the time.
That's right. When you're right 52% of the time, you're wrong 48% of the time. Right. So I don't think Ohio State's going to get the NCAA tournament. It would take some kind of miracle, I think, at this point for that to happen. Obviously, talk about this team as they continue to play, through the regular season into the tournament. I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens after this season. What is their approach to the portal? What is their approach to recruiting? All that kind of stuff. They're going
to get it right this time. They're going to hit on all of their portal additions this time.
I just want them to hit on a center. Just get one damn center that can play competently every game. That's it. They don't even have to be good. You just have to be mediocre, and I'm okay with that.
This team is not allowed to have a competent player over the height of 6'10" or at 6'10"
clearly not
or greater.
So hopefully that happens.
Will never happen
for Diebler in Ohio State, but we'll see. So that's our spiel on the men's basketball team. We'll talk a little about some changes to the college football playoff and some other things with Ohio State sports. But before we do that, we'll do Ask Us Anything and remind you that the Dubcast is sponsored by the dry goods store at 11warriors.com. Shirts, hats, stickers, all kinds of great stuff, including national championship shirts and college football playoff referencing shirts. So I would.
Can you also get stuff from the sister site, First Ohio Battery?
Yes,
as you are.
I've got that. I'm supporting the CBJ out here. Still in contention. That's a team that is in legit contention for a playoff spot, despite some obviously huge adversity that they've had to deal with, both during and before the season. So yeah. Anyway. Definitely check that stuff out. Drygoods.11warriors.com. Let's do Ask Us Anything. You can ask us anything by sending us questions to dubcast@11warriors.com. First one here. This is from Bryant. What is your go-to order from a Chinese takeout restaurant? Not anything fancy. Just one of those generic Chinese restaurants with like General Tso's. And what do you get when you want to mix it up a little bit? So what's your go-to order?
Mix it up a little bit. God, I'm a sucker for orange chicken.
Orange chicken's delicious, man.
It's the classic. But I also I enjoy Mongolian beef. Shrimp fried rice is great. I love pot stickers. I don't care if they're pork or any other really kind of meat.
The gyoza, you got to get that.
They're always good. But yeah, it's hard to go wrong.
That's true.
Chinese food Americanized Chinese food is just absolutely incredible.
Well, you have experience with like authentic Chinese food too, right?
So like Hong Kong.
Yeah. Well, still, I mean, that's I think that's significant. I mean, obviously they're two different
shark,
things. But
I had octopus. It was all very interesting.
There you go. You said you had shark?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
That was
shark fin soup.
It's kind of chickeny. No, just straight up shark.
Right on.
It was it's kind of chickeny,
Chickeny? That's what they call chicken of the sea is what I've heard. That's shark. That's shark. Yeah, I mean, sweet and sour chicken's usually my go-to just because I'm boring. But I like everything on the menu pretty much. I will say, one of my absolute favorite things to do when I lived on campus as a student, I lived on North Campus and like a block away from number one Chinese food, which I think was like shut down intermittently for health concerns until they finally
It
went
was
out of
still
business.
there when I was in college.
Well, it was like they'd be gone for a month and they'd be back and they'd be gone for another month and like, okay. My freshman year, I got
like the PJs of ethnic Ohio State campus
well,
restaurants.
which makes sense because they're like literally 30 feet away from each other. So I remember one night I went to number one Chinese and they was just as they were closing and they gave me like literally like one of their giant like pans that they had left. It was just an aluminum pan. It probably was like 6 or 8 pounds of sweet and sour chicken. And I just took it back to the dorm. I was like, hey, party guys in my place. It was sick. It was awesome.
When you're in the dorms, you're a celebrity if you come back with
hell yeah, man.
sack of sweet and sour chicken.
So my way to recreate that feeling is to go to Thai's near campus, and they will give you enough food to like last a week. It's ridiculous, and you can get anything. It doesn't matter. It's all good. It's not, well, let me put it this way. It's not great. It's acceptable, but the fact that they give you about 20 pounds of food per order makes it completely worth it in all sense. So I'm a big fan of that. Sometimes I do like to mix it up, get their spicy stuff. They put like jalapenos in it, which is weird, but I like the spicy stuff. So.
When I lived at Blackburn and I was going to the RPAC 5 days a week as a freshman, my cheat meal was Panda Express because it was 2 blocks away from my house.
Of course, yeah, you got to do it. I mean, Chinese food is just, Asian food in general, it's just delicious stuff.
Oh yeah.
All right, this is from our good friend Alvin, who wants to know, if you were an inanimate object, what would it be and why?
What a question.
If you were an inanimate object, what would you be and why? I would say just like a big freaking useless rock in the middle of a field. Huh?
With all the writing I do in my computer, some days I already feel like an inanimate object sitting around.
You're an inanimate object.
Yeah.
I'm sorry I called you an inanimate object.
Oh, it's okay.
I don't know, a big rock, something old timey. I feel like maybe like a spinning wheel or or like an old Dutch windmill. I feel like I could be an old Dutch windmill from like the 1500s that somehow stood around, but you kind of know that it's rickety and going to fall apart eventually. But people go, oh, cool. Well, hope it's around in 5 years. Like things are just casually falling off of it as it spins. That's kind of how I feel. I think that's a good one for me. I'm still technically moving, but like it's hard to really believe that it's going to continue for a long period of time.
I'll go with a wind chime.
Ooh, a wind chime. That's nice. The melodious, dulcet tones of George Eisner.
Be very zen, and I'm still.
You hang out on the porches of like hippies from the 50s, like from the 70s,
and even though I'm inanimate, I am still moved by the world around me, and the two in tandem together create bliss for all those within earshot.
I appreciate that. Okay. Thanks.
Except for Johnny.
Except for me, yeah. Okay, so this next one, it does require me to adjust my hat. So, Johnny, this is from Paul. Johnny, how did you get the scar on your left eyebrow right here? Okay.
I have to be totally honest. I have never even noticed you have one.
I know.
We've been doing the show together almost 2 years now.
I know.
Which is totally crazy to say that it's already gone by that fast. I've never noticed this until you just brought it up.
I guess Paul
not just trying to flatter you. I'm being totally serious.
No, it's fine. It's not that noticeable. It's pretty small. Well, it's not like small, but it's it's on my eyebrow there. So the joke that I would make is that like, a crazy cult leader, did a home invasion and killed himself by accident while trying to take me out. And then 12 years later, I got a letter saying I was a wizard, but that's stupid. But What actually happened was I was in preschool and I was running around like, a preschooler does. And it was the preschool where I went was in this person's house, essentially. So they had a fireplace and I tripped and I like hit the corner of a brick fireplace and like split my head open.
Wow.
Yeah. And I got to get a bunch of stitches when I was like 4. And then about 2 or 3 years later, I was riding my bike and I fell off my bike and then slammed my head on a cement corner, like on
Oh
the
dear.
road, and did the exact same thing. So in the exact same spot. And so I had to have more stitches. And so that part of my eyebrow just doesn't grow hair anymore. So yeah, I just
Wow.
have a little scar there. So nothing major, everybody gets scars. George, Paul also wants to know if you have any significant scars or anything like that.
Not as much anymore. I did like I wiped out on my scooter pretty bad when I was in like first grade and like skinned off a pretty significant part of like here, I'm clutching the microphone, so it's kind of hard to
Yeah.
figure out how to. I'm gonna go with a nice reverse grip here to kind of get the. You can
Okay, I
kind of
see what you're
see
saying.
it.
I see what you're
You can
saying.
kind
Yeah.
of see it a little bit. It's still right there. I mean, I
Yeah.
skinned off like this whole part of my elbow right here, and it never grew. It never really quite grew back correctly. So that's kind of always just been there. I also for a long time ago, one of my friends in middle school had this weird emotional attachment to his hat. I think he called it Smitty, and
Okay.
I took it once as a joke, like obviously planning to give it back to him, and he was so mad that he literally like stabbed me with his pencil, and
Yikes.
it broke off.
Oh,
And
nice.
so for probably like 10 or 15 years after that, I just had a little piece of graphite like in that same part
I
of my
feel like
arm.
everybody has that story where some crazy like weird kid stabbed him with a pencil and then just broke it off. Because I didn't get stabbed with a pencil, but I got smacked with a ruler and I still have a scar like on the crook of my
Yeah.
elbow. I've got a scar on my hand. You can kind of see it there a little bit. That's for me playing with an X-Acto knife when I was in 6th grade. I was supposed to be doing my homework, and instead I was playing with an X-Acto knife. And then I have it's kind of hard to tell, but I also have a scar like here from hot glue that a classmate accidentally he got me with a hot glue gun because he wasn't paying attention, and I like threw a chair. You know. Anyway,
Now
that's
the
a whole
funny
other
thing
story.
is that guy was actually in a DoorDash commercial this recently,
That's cool.
and I saw it after like I think it was the weekend before Ohio State played Oregon the first time this past season. So it was after Sunday Night Football because I remember texting it to my parents.
Nice.
And yeah, I remember thinking, "Oh, look at that! That's the guy that stabbed
That
me with
maimed
a
me.
yeah."
Nice.
All these Hollywood types are cut from the same cloth of crazy,
Yeah.
they're all capable of doing something like
They're
that.
all nutcases. Last one here. This is from Kevin, who says, which players on the Ohio State men's basketball team do you think will be most successful in the NBA? All of them. I think they're all going to be all stars. I think they'll go on. And do you think any of these dudes will make a roster?
Yeah, Michi's gonna rally.
Okay.
No, come on, no. Bruce.
You don't think Bruce is? I think he'll be a G leaguer. I think.
Also, Mobley's a freshman. Like, I think that he's got to get more consistent. But how many times have you heard that guy compared to Curry this year?
Okay. It's fine.
Just in terms of the release.
Yeah, I know. I know what you're saying. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying that's stupid.
He's probably too undersized to play in the NBA, but I think he could be good. But yeah, Bruce, I think just for the athlete that he is and how strong he is finishing at the rim.
Yeah.
It's probably the best, but I mean, I don't know if he's like as well. I feel like he leaves a little bit desired as a facilitator. He has some great games where he's facilitating very well. It just doesn't happen consistently enough where I think he could become a routine creator in an
The
NBA
issue with Thornton
offense.
is that when he gets to the NBA or G League or whatever he ends up doing the next level, and honestly, again, most of these guys are going to be playing like overseas or something like that. But let's say he really was trying for the NBA. He's not going, like, they don't want a dude like him to be trying to score 25, 30 points a night, right? They want a dude like him to be a really good defender and a facilitator, right? Like Mike Conley has made an entire career doing that kind of stuff. And he's had an incredible career because he's really, really good at it. I don't think Thornton's that good, and I don't think that's his game. So that's an issue. I just don't think his skill set translates super well to the NBA. I think he'll be a G leaguer. He'll probably get some run, but I don't see him, getting to like a second contract.
Well, it's easy for us to say that. And at the same time, there's a lot of players, particularly in recent seasons, that I don't know how many people would have anticipated become members or even mainstays of NBA rosters, that they end up finding their way into doing that.
That's true.
You look at the most recent, Jamison Battle just got a multi-year deal after kind of being on a trial with the Raptors, and now he's going to be around there for presumably a little bit. Jayshawn Tate is another great example. I don't think anybody could have.
I don't think anybody expected that with the Jazz. Give me a break. I mean, that's crazy.
These guys figure, at least it seems like at least one player from every Ohio State team figures out how to get on a roster. So if we're going off of that basis, I am optimistic that Bruce will figure it out somewhere.
Yeah, it is interesting the names that are in the league though, right? Like, I mean, Bryson Sabah, Jason Tate, Jameson. Well, Jameson I think isn't super surprised, but like Malachi Branham, I don't know that
Battle
would be
didn't get drafted.
Yeah. So I mean, these guys have kind of played themselves into it. So if Thornton can do that, that'll be awesome, and more power to him. I hope he's able to do that. I think that'd be pretty sick. But yeah, we'll see what happens. It's hard to say because there hasn't really been a guy. I mean, D'Angelo Russell was the dude who I think most people thought would have maybe the most productive NBA career. And he's been, incredibly up and down. But he's still one of the best of all time from Ohio State in the NBA, which says something about that. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, I think, next season for these guys. So
you guys are going to be stunned when Kalen Etzler is on an NBA roster in 3 years. That's right. You watch.
By the way, I guess that's not really fair. I was going to ask you, who do you think the number 2, because I pulled up the stats here. The number 1 Ohio State player in the NBA is John Havlicek. I don't think that's, a shock to anybody in terms of points per game. Number 2 is Neil Johnson. Do you know who number 3 might be? Do you have a guess on that?
I don't even know who Neil Johnson is.
He started playing in the 40s. So
okay,
that doesn't, I'm not expecting you to know.
The great Neil Johnson.
Yes.
1940. Before the Second War.
He pulled up his socks super high and he's hitting all of these super big shots.
I had no clue.
Michael Redd.
Oh, I should have guessed that.
19 points a game for his career.
He's the answer to like half of the Ohio State related NBA trivia questions.
That's true. Him and Jerry Lucas are pretty, and Havlicek obviously, but Jerry Lucas, by the way, not, say about like 17 points a game, which is good, but not like epic.
Respectable.
Like so yeah, it's respectable. Pride of Middletown, Ohio. He actually grew up playing his basketball on a court like literally 2 blocks away from the house where I grew up. So kind of interesting. Anyway, that's Ask Us Anything for this week. Thank you guys for sending that in. A couple more things that we want to talk about here. First of all, there are some proposed changes to the college football playoff, mostly to just benefit the Big Ten and the SEC. They have been... Yeah, they've been talking about it, and this is like kind of the, they had some meetings. They want to have these 4 auto bids essentially, which I think is just the dumbest possible thing.
The rich get richer.
Well, and again, if you're Ohio State, like, why should I care? This is good for us. But honestly, Ohio State's going to be making a 12-team playoff more years than not, right? That's just going to happen. But secondly, the appeal of a playoff is the idea that it isn't it isn't set, right? The whole thing is that you can be good enough to play yourself in. When you give all these auto bids, particularly 8 to the SEC and the Big Ten total, I just think that undermines the whole thing. I don't want them to expand it again. I think that sucks. I don't want them to expand the freaking March Madness, which they're going to do anyway. no, it's 12. I actually thought 12 was a lot, but like I don't want it to get any bigger than that. And I think it's stupid that they would have these automatic bids for the Big Ten and the SEC, particularly given how the SEC performed in the college football playoff this season. Like way below expectations.
Yeah.
And bowls in general. I don't know. I don't feel like it's earned, and I feel like it undermines the what attracts people to this whole playoff concept, which is that anybody can play themselves in.
And
Be it Boise State or whoever.
I especially don't like, I mean, I know this goes against what even Ryan Day has communicated he wants, but I don't like taking away rewarding the conference champions, because I think, again, one of the coolest things about the playoff that we just had was that you had Boise State and Arizona State positioned where they could compete based on earning their way into that spot.
Right.
And it didn't come at the detriment of the other teams in the back, because the two teams that made the final were the 7 and 8 seeds in the tournament. So, or the playoff. So I agree. It's too much change, and it's too much change in favor of at least one conference that probably doesn't deserve it. But if we're trying to, get a more well-rounded sense of who the best team in the sport is, I don't like that we're just rewarding more teams on the merit of playing in the same conference, even if the Big Ten is currently the best conference in the sport.
Yeah.
I want to see more teams from different walks of the country get in there and have a chance to compete. And we're not going to get that with this expansion, which just makes it largely feel unnecessary. And it also cheapens the value of conference championships now in a way where,
I mean, they're talking about getting rid of them like altogether. Like that.
No, I feel like a lot of people are assuming that they would get rid of them based on the fact that this would kind of invalidate their purpose.
Right.
But the thing is, the people that are actually making the decisions aren't really talking about getting rid of them, because it's another money-making opportunity.
Well,
why would you get rid of them?
Yeah, that's a good point.
So it just makes, but even if the money-making opportunity doesn't go away, you're still greatly cheapening the stakes of games like that by doing this.
Yeah.
It's just too much change within too small of a scope. I'm glad. I know people said for a long time the playoff needed to expand, but I'm still glad that we didn't get done with the first installment of the playoff and then schedule it so that 2 years after 2014 we were immediately going to have a 12-team playoff. That we had a period to say,
yeah,
let's get a better sample size of how big this is before we expand it. Then we watched Ohio State get screwed over by the committee several times and finally said, okay, this is a good reason why we need to have a 12-team playoff. And I'm happy with the way things are now. But to not give this more of a trial period than the 3 maybe seasons that we're going to get of a 12-team playoff before they finally expand it to 16 teams, it just feels like too much and too drastic of changes for the sport too soon.
It just really bothers me, the idea that you would get automatic bid. I mean, it really is. I mean, I don't like the expansion thing. I feel like that was kind of inevitable regardless, just because, it's money. And
you would have wanted to stay with 4 teams?
No, I mean, 12 is fine. I mean, I honestly, I would have preferred 8 teams, but I guess my point is,
I probably would have liked that too.
Yeah. My point though is that I'm not surprised that they're trying to go to 16. And as much as I don't like that, I would much prefer just kind of keeping where they're at instead of having these auto bids. Because again, what attracts me to this is the idea that any team can play themselves into it. And I don't like the idea that you would have these set, spots reserved for, a 9-3 Ohio State team. Well, we got to put them in. Like, not necessarily. I mean, I'm not going to complain about it as an Ohio State fan, but like, I don't like that concept. I don't like that idea. I don't like the idea of blue bloods getting to run everything just because they're a name. And I think ultimately what they're trying to do is come up with a replacement for declining interest in these crappy bowl games, right? Like, oh man, the Gasparilla Bowl is not pulling in the views. Well, okay, that's fine. Stop inviting 6
They
and
just all
7
need
teams.
to come up with, the kind of gimmicks that the Pop-Tart Bowl does, because
right.
everybody loves those for some reason.
Yeah. Well, that's fine. If it works, it works. But I think for most of these bowls, it's not working, and they're trying to figure out another way to kind of prop this thing up. There is a saturation point with all of this. And I do think that eventually people will be like, well, then what's the difference between this and the NFL? And, Ohio State was uniquely built to take advantage of an expanded playoff because they had the kind of depth that a lot of other teams simply did not have. But what if you have a situation next season where even in a 12-team playoff, you've got 4 or 5 major stars who are hurt and can't play in the national championship game because maybe in the semifinal or the quarterfinal, somebody just couldn't, maybe they broke their leg or some terrible thing happened. And you start to realize that, this is one of the problems with the NFL playoffs where you get so many injuries and it becomes a game of just trying to manage, the health of your team more than trying to beat your opponent. And I think that's what you're going to see in college football at some point if you keep expanding this stuff. So, it's the same problem that leagues have had, like in the NBA and NHL and and even in baseball, where you expand and expand and expand, and eventually you water down the product to the point where people aren't that interested anymore. I think they will eventually get to a saturation point with college football, and I don't know. I don't like this.
It is interesting that one of the only negative points of feedback from the playoff that just happened was that the national championship game was happening too late at a point when people wanted to more primarily focus on the NFL or what was left of the NFL season going into the playoffs. And people just thought that the process of the playoff itself was spread out too long. And even the teams that were top seeds were complaining that, it was actually a detriment to us to have so much more of a longer bye than what the lower seeded teams got, that they were more, competitively tested because of that and ready to get back at it as a result. And now the response to that point of negative feedback is we're actually going to be expanding the playoff and
let's
making
make it worse,
even longer and bigger. So I don't see how that helps moving up the national championship to put it in a more palatable spot. Granted, not playing it on a Monday night would probably also help,
but that goes back to your original problem of trying to compete with the NFL, right?
They need to find a way they should have just found a way to simplify the existing process they had, as opposed to now bringing in more teams and making it more complicated.
I agree.
While cheapening the stakes of other games elsewhere.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens with it. If they do end up expanding and doing all this stuff, I would hope, I know they're not going to, but I would hope that they maybe shorten somehow the regular season, compact some of this a little bit, instead of trying to make this like a 6-month sport. But I'm not confident that'll work out that way. Sane moves are usually not made in the face of short-term financial gains. So that's that on that. A few other things I want to mention here. Ohio State women's swimming and diving gets its 5th Big Ten championship in the last 6 years. Congrats to them. I was never a good swimmer, but I did swim for a very long time competitively, like from the time I was 6 till I graduated high school.
You got recruited for water polo.
Yes, I did. I did get recruited for water polo, which I got a letter. Let's be very clear. It's not like somebody came to my house and sat down in our living room and said, "Boy, we really think this John Ginner kid's going to make it to the Olympics." No, nobody said. I got a letter in the mail saying, "Check out our water polo program. We think you would like." And I said, and then threw it in the trash. I was like, hell no, I'm not doing that.
You were an accomplished enough swimmer that they even put you on the mailing list to begin with.
I'm a strong swimmer. I'm a large person. that was it. That was my only, I think that was it. So anyway, point is that I have an affinity for swimming. I think it's an awesome sport. I love that Ohio State has been so successful in the past half decade or so. So congrats to the Ohio State women's swimmers. That's a fantastic accomplishment. And then also we've got another, it's sad that we have to close out the Dubcast, I think 2 weeks in a row on this. Unfortunately, I do want to, extend our condolences to the family and friends of Donovan Munger, a former Ohio State defensive tackle. He died at 30 years old, a member of the 2014 national championship team. He had dealt with some health issues while he was on the team. And so don't know if those connected necessarily or anything like that. But we do, obviously wish all the best to his friends and family. And, I know he'll be missed. And of course, as we said last week, again, one of the positives out of this is the Ohio State family is super tight. I know he'll have support, and he definitely has support from the Dubcast. So all the best wishes to his friends and family, and we hope that they can kind of lean on their friends, their Buckeye friends going forward. So
yeah, he was in school at the same time I was, and he was a national champion. So I'm glad he at least got to experience that peak in life.
Yeah,
rest
absolutely.
in peace.
So that's the Dubcast for this week. We'll be back next week. We'll be talking about Ohio State men's basketball. Probably also, I mean, if they win, and let's say they win the Big Ten tournament, then feel free to dunk on us as much as possible. Since that's not going to happen, we will continue to proclaim ourselves as the smartest people in the room. But until then, I'm Johnny.
I am George the Prophet.
That's right. We'll see you next week.
Take care, folks.